This may be hard to hear. You could be subsidizing the costs of AI data centers and the big tech companies that own those centers. Trillion-dollar companies like Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft, and you may be paying their bills. So over the last few weeks, I've been asked a lot about how AI is connected to rising electricity costs. And I thought what I'd do is make a video to explain just what's going on here. Because yes, utility bills are going up in the US by a lot. Let me start with the basics. Look, there are two big things that increase your electricity bills. One is classic supply and demand. When demand for energy in your area goes up faster than supply, like when everyone cranks up the heat during a winter storm, that limited supply of energy becomes more expensive and everybody has to pay more. The second reason your electricity bill goes up, and this one is really important, is from the cost of building the infrastructure needed to meet that demand. Think upgrades to the electric grid, building transmission lines and relays and wiring and conduits to get the energy into your house. And when new customers come onto the grid, utilities need to upgrade that infrastructure, and those costs are typically spread out all across all the consumers in the area. So here's what's going on with AI. AI is powered by these giant data centers. They are huge warehouses filled with servers and data storage systems. And they require a lot of energy to store the data that the AI model needs to run. It's energy to test the AI model over and over again so that it becomes smarter. Energy to run applications like ChatGPT and Gemini. Some of these data centers are so gigantic that just one of them uses more energy than the entire city of Philadelphia. As you can imagine, right now, the biggest AI companies are trying to build more and more data centers as they race to build more AI. So let's say a data center opens up in your area, and now demand for energy is going up by a lot. Because the energy your area needs is not just for heating homes and small businesses. A lot of the energy supply is being siphoned off to these massive data centers. And that's what's happening. So demand overall is way up, and then bam, that hits your electricity bill. And to meet that high demand, utility companies are rushing to build more power plants and more power lines and other infrastructure to actually transport that energy. It's upgrades to the grid, upgrades to the pipes and transmission lines that get energy to you and to the data center. Upgrades that are not cheap. Upgrades that cost billions of dollars. And who pays for those? Not just the tech companies, everyone in the area. You. Yes, you could be paying for upgrades that are being built only because the data center needs the energy. And here's the thing. We don't know exactly how much of those costs are being passed along directly to you. Why? Because the contracts between the big tech companies and the utility companies are typically secret. They sign non-disclosure agreements so that the rest of us don't know what's in those contracts. Is it possible that Meta has a deal with your utility company that lets Meta pay for an even lower share of those grid upgrades than you? Yeah. Is it possible that these big tech companies are actually sticking you with all of the costs of building and operating their data centers? Oh, yeah. So I wanted to understand this better myself. So I worked with some of my colleagues in the Senate to open an investigation, because it should not be the case that you are bankrolling the electricity costs of these trillion-dollar tech companies. I mean, that's just not right. So we started our investigation by writing to the largest companies building data centers, including Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. And we heard back from all of them. They didn't all say exactly the same thing, but there's some patterns I want to point out. A bunch of these companies, like Google, came back and said they're going to pay for 100% of the electricity they use to power their data centers. Great. Google is going to pay their full electricity bill, just like you do, just like everybody else does. But if you remember what I said before, paying their electricity bill doesn't mean that they're fully covering the costs that make your bill go up. So what about the massive infrastructure upgrade costs that we're all paying for? It's a good question. And the best response we get from these big tech companies is that they're going to help lower these infrastructure costs. Can we pull out the air quotes? Help lower these infrastructure costs. But that's where the devil is really in the details. What does help mean? Are they covering all the costs of the infrastructure upgrades needed to connect their data centers to the grid? And who decides how much of these infrastructure upgrades that they're actually covering? And what happens if a data center closes at the same time your utility is halfway through a $1 billion upgrade? Who foots the bill then? These are the questions that we deserve answers to. But instead, here's what we're seeing. News articles that say Microsoft has a plan to stop AI data centers from hiking up your electricity bill. Oh, and Donald Trump, who has spent the last year trying to kill any guardrails on his big tech billionaire buddies, is trying to take credit for that kind of vague promise. But I looked at their plans, and I'm concerned they don't sufficiently address where some of the major price increases come from. So here's the deal. Don't be fooled. Big tech companies saying that they will pay their whole electricity bill doesn't mean that they won't raise your bill. Nope. And I want to point out one more thing. When I'm reading these responses from companies like Microsoft and Meta and Google, it's not just what they say that matters. It's also important what they don't say and which questions I asked that they just refuse to answer. So, for example, the companies refuse to share any more information about their contracts with the utility companies. That means we still don't know the actual rates that these data centers pay. We don't know how much of the cost of the infrastructure upgrades they are covering. And we still don't have information that we need to know if the utilities are actually passing costs along to you. So here's where that leaves me. We need more transparency from these big tech companies, and that means no more secret contracts with utilities. And we can't just take big tech's vague promises that they're not driving up your electricity bills. We need to see the receipts. I'm going to keep pushing for these big tech companies to pay their fair share and not just pretend to pay. It's time for a little accountability for big tech and their friends at the utility company. Let's get it.